Hi, in this video, I'll be sharing with you an example of Engaging Men, a project that we've developed at the organization I work for, Stígamót here in Iceland. And it's a training for men and boys on how to combat violence against women and girls. It's kind of started with our ongoing, for many years, ongoing kind of way to how do we answer the issue of how do we reach out to men and boys who are immersed in rape culture and defined by toxic masculinity? How do we address this issue? And that on one side, and then how do we then address that while simultaneously maintaining the approach of being respectful of the experiences of survivors? And this was all in the context of kind of the 2017 Me Too wave, and then also there had been in the years before in Iceland, for at least 5 years before that, quite a few other Icelandic waves that kind of contributed to the extent of what effect Me Too had at the time and continues to have in Iceland. But a part of that picture was the backlash that, of course, always happens, but was something that could not be ignored, and also both the shape of the backlash and how diverse and developed, and that how many of the not only anti-feminist but misogynist and anti gender equality narratives have found different ways to emerge, of course, through social media and different kind of platforms, but also how they've infiltrated public debate and public discussion. So there are two things happening: an increased discussion and debate on issues like sexual violence, but the backlash is also more public and quite toxic. So how do we address that? How can we at least contribute to addressing that? So we thought one way would be to devise a training that we call Bandamenn, in English, allies. That's the English translation, or Bandamenn is the Icelandic version of allies. And it's a training for men who are interested in the issue and maybe want more tools and have an opportunity to kind of talk about and get a better insight into the issue and a better understanding of sexual violence, but also how to address it in different contexts. And for when we developed this, this was very important to understand which men we wanted to focus on. We decided that we couldn't focus on all with a training like this, but instead we focused on the men that are on the right side of this table, the ones that are curious, that are engaged or want to be engaged, who are active, and even in some cases ready to lead. And the idea was to help these men to get better tools, a better understanding of the issue, but also how to address the issue, so they can address the issue with men that are either overwhelmed or hesitant, the ones more on the left side of the table. I know this is a simplified view, but this is actually was a very helpful way to understand who we wanted to address, who we want to focus on, and why. So the objectives of the training are for participants to achieve a deeper understanding of a broad set of issues and concepts relevant to sexual violence and gender-based violence, and to create a sharing and learning space for men to discuss and design ways and strategies to involve more men, and to contribute to increased awareness of rape culture and its deep-rootedness in male cultures, educate the participants about male cultures, masculinities, patriarchy, privilege, gender structures of opportunity, also provide insights into kind of various ways of spaces of action and resistance, that there are different ways that we can all contribute to changing this culture, changing how sexual violence is both seen and processed in our societies, and also have a deeper understanding of the concept of allies. Related to that, and the different space of action resistance means also understanding how you can be an ally in your context, being aware of the politics of the language we use, devising preventive and restorative approaches to dealing with perpetrators of violence, and underlining the importance of a survivor-centered approach versus a perpetrator-centered approach, especially in the light of the fact that we live in societies where the perpetrator-centered perspective is dominant, even when there's policies and laws and structures that are to support survivors of sexual violence, but the perpetrator-centered angle is never too far away. So the methodology is based on our work on combating sexual violence and gender-based violence for over 30 years. We've been developing the survivor-based approach, understanding, the experiences of survivors, but also what different kinds of actions and initiatives, what effect they have on survivors. We have use a feminist understanding of gender-based violence. And then we've been merging that with how to create a space for men to learn about and discuss gender-based violence, and engaging men and respecting experience of survivors of sexual violence, combining these two elements. And in order to create this learning space, I've mentioned practically for the trainings themselves to create a comfortable environment, provide a very diverse educational material, make sure to have a lot of time for discussions. Those are very important. The sessions where we have engaged discussions, they are very, very useful, and they talk about how much they learn from that, because the sharing and understanding how you can approach this in various ways, a lot of that comes also from the group. And we use different kinds of exercises and role play exercises. And we also find it very important to have house rules, that we focus on respect and no hate speech, and there's confidentiality in the group if people want to share something more personal, and that doesn't go doesn't go further, and no one shares that outside of this space, outside of this group. And then practically part of the practical setup is that we find it important that they meet more than once. So we try to have 2 or 3 sessions, depending on the length. So all in all, we try to get maybe 9 hours. It could easily be longer, but what we've been trying to do increasingly, and in the future we'll be using also online options, to have them also do certain things, do certain exercises, and look at certain materials between the sessions. And we find that also very important, because then they process, and for each session, the conversations become richer. These are the kind of the main themes, the overarching themes that we try to focus on. And we start with sharing a bit about Stígamót and our work, and how we work and why we work in a certain way. And then we share with them the experiences of working with survivors, and the biggest focus on that is the after effects of sexual violence. That's of course the main focus of our work, helping survivors work through after effects of sexual violence. And then based on that, we look at what the survivor-based approach can mean in different contexts, and then we look at the different forms of sexual violence, and then we go into the wider context. We look at patriarchy, and within that, of course, masculinities, and how rape culture and porn culture, and how we talk about or do not talk about perpetrators, how that all kind of connects. And then the role of men in combating sexual violence against women and girls. And what we try to do is to take the issue of sexual violence and see it in the bigger picture, that it isn't just certain incidents of perpetrators subjecting violence to particular victims, or that certain men that subject violence to certain women, for example. No, it's part of a big picture, and that's why we try with the course to see that this is part of a gender system, patriarchy, where things like gender roles, gender stereotypes, male and female, ideas of male and female professions, the gender pay gap, negative stereotypes about women, unrealistic beauty standards, objectification, hate speech, violence and harassment and rape culture. This is all connected. These are not just standalone elements. Rape culture and sexual violence is part of that picture. So we use the whole course to draw that picture and help them make those connections. And the kind of maybe the topics that are very important to address is like how quite wide and widespread rape culture is, and what it means, and what kind of forms and shapes it can take. Also how important is that not only we talk about perpetrators, but also how we look at how we talk about perpetrators. And of course, for many years, we didn't talk about them. If we talked about sexual violence, if we did, we talked about survivors. And what, of course, one of our objectives for many years has been is to, no, if we're talking about sexual violence, we have to talk about the perpetrators. And then how do we tackle that debate? How do we ensure that debate and the approaches are survivor-based? And then also, how does, in a wider picture, how does justice and responsibility look like? Does that just only have one shape, or is that more complex? And does it maybe need to be more complex? We stress the importance of understanding a topic, certain concepts like toxic masculinity, and talk about it in the concept of masculinities, plural, and why these topics like these notions or these concepts like rape culture and toxic masculinity, why they're important, and why they exist, and what use they have in this context, even though they often get the reaction of like, no, we don't want to talk about something toxic, but they are important and they can be helpful. And then we try to find different ways to talk about the experiences of women or marginalized groups, and how that links with male privilege, and how many men are not aware of the experiences that most women around them have, and that's one of the discussions that the men often have in the group, that they didn't realize how extensive the different kinds of discrimination and abuse and violence that the women around them have experienced and have gone through, and how that affects their daily life. So we have different ways to address that. So we try to then draw out what actually the survivor-based approach can mean in the context of men engaging, and what they can do to contribute to a more survivor-based environment. And here are a few examples we try to draw out through the training, what men can do, to make a more survivor-based society, contribute to building that. To support survivors in our environment. Of course, that's very basic, but listen and not become defensive, and not state not all men. Become aware of the connections between some masculine norms and gender-based violence. To be aware of how many women around you are survivors of sexual violence. To support organizations that work with survivors. Look critically at your own ideas about sex, boundaries, consent, porn, and prostitution. Look at your own behavior. Look at your ideas and communication with women and other marginal groups. Try to understand that as a man, you will most likely not fully understand what women experience on a daily basis and other marginalized groups, and to encourage and support perpetrators to take responsibility and seek help. So these are just pictures of a few of the groups we've had. And we had a bit of a break during COVID, but we have already quite a few trainings lined up this fall and next winter, and it's been developing very nicely. And the debate has an effect, of course, as well. And we feel that there are men out there, and they've been approaching us. That there are men that are interested in this issue and want to find ways how to contribute. And what's been happening also recently, that workplaces have also been approaching us and asking us for versions of this training. So I hope this was useful, and a useful example of how to engage men in a particular way. Okay, thank you.